I'm Will Sullivan inside the NFL Network newsroom with breaking news out of New York, and the Jets have fired GM Mike Maccagnan, and taking over in his spot, at least on an interim basis, is head coach Adam Gase. This news brought to us by the New York Jets right here on their social media account from Twitter, and essentially in it, CEO Christopher Johnson had said it was in the best interest of the New York Jets to dismiss today Mike Maccagnan as the general manager, who has served as the general manager over the past 4 years. We now bring in NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport to give us context. And Ian, quite simply, this is a stunner. Why do this now?
Well, as far as the timing, you're right. It is a surprise. You'd think if you're going to fire someone after the draft that it would be immediately after the draft. And in fact, Adam Gase, who now is the interim GM, believe it or not, was talking to reporters after the draft, denied that there was a rift between him and Mike Maccagnan. And in fact, Maccagnan did several interviews, including my podcast, by the way, in the weeks after the draft, presuming that he was safe. And then we get the news today via this statement from the Jets that Maccagnan and Brian Heimerdinger, his right-hand man, have both, in fact, been fired. Surprising timing, yes, in that it was 3 weeks or so after the draft, when there's really not a ton of work for the general manager to do. But obviously, this is what the Jets believed in, and they need a new general manager right now.
Well, how much confidence did they have in Maccagnan, given the fact that he has a young quarterback, surrounded him with pieces? Le'Veon Bell, for example, obviously brought in C.J. Mosley on the defensive side. So how was his performance then viewed, given the fact that he was trying to build this team around a young signal caller and Sam Darnold?
Right. Look at this team that whoever the new general manager is inherits. I mean, it has a franchise quarterback, someone who many people, not just the Jets, around the league, believe that Sam Darnold is going to be a franchise guy. As a number 3 pick in the draft, Quinnen Williams, who certainly plenty of evaluators thought was the top overall prospect on the board. They just spent more than $100 million in free agency, bringing in Le'Veon Bell and C.J. Mosley and Jamison Crowder and on and on. The new GM inherits a lot. And in fact, there were things going on with the Adam Gase and Mike Maccagnan relationship. Perhaps that is why they made this decision. But as far as the actual job performance, hard to find a spot where you say, well, maybe a better GM might have helped. That, I think, when you're looking at the landscape of this, actual job performance is one where you're going to have to look pretty hard to try to find a place where it could have been better.
How could this potentially affect Sam Darnold on the field, given the fact that Adam Gase is now going to have to be worried about personnel around him, as well as play calling and the offense, etc.?
It probably should not affect Sam Darnold too much, especially immediately, because, again, most of the work in the offseason is done. The Jets have spent in free agency, spent a lot, got Sam Darnold some weapons, Le'Veon Bell and Jamison Crowder and others. Probably not going to affect him as far as draft picks because, unless you're talking about undrafted free agents or just street free agents, there's really not a lot of work to be done. So the actual effects on Darnold and the rest of the players is not going to be felt for probably a year. But of course, this is something that players are now going to be asked about and going to have to focus on at least until they find a new general manager.
Now, Gase is the interim general manager. What are the odds that he potentially is the permanent general manager?
I've not heard any indication that he would be the permanent general manager, although clearly, just based on the fact that he is still standing, that he was named interim GM, and he is clearly going to have a lot of say in who the actual general manager would be. And you have to think that the relationship with Gase is going to be paramount when you're trying to find someone who's going to be in charge of personnel. Joe Douglas, the Eagles personnel man, has been mentioned in league circles as a possible match here with Adam Gase. They're represented by the same agent, Jimmy Sexton. They do have a strong relationship. That would be something to consider. Obviously, they're going to do a search here, but the relationship with Gase sounds like it is going to be important going forward, not just someone who can pick players and make trades and all of that.
Now, we've seen head coaches before also wear the general manager hat. So if there's anything that Adam Gase can take from some of those examples, what would they be, in your opinion?
Yeah, there's not a lot of great precedent for coaches acting as general managers and having full control and really being that successful, quite frankly. I mean, the Patriots do it with Bill Belichick. That is a special situation. We've seen a lot more examples of coaches taking on a lot, getting personnel control, and then in the end deciding that that was not what they wanted to do. You know, coming out of Miami, that was what Adam Gase had told people too, that he really did not want to have full control, did not want to be in charge of personnel, simply wanted to focus on coaching, which it sounds like he tried to do, but clearly was in a situation where it was just not tenable going forward. And now the Jets need to find someone else. If Gase is going to focus only on coaching, the Jets need to find someone else that he has confidence in to manage the personnel side.
Was there ever any sense from Maccagnan's side that maybe he was operating on a short leash given the results that the Jets have had over the last 3 years at all, before the draft or maybe prior to that?
No, I mean, there were rumors, and this was something, you know, when you talk to general managers and evaluators before the draft, this was a question I got a lot, was what's going to happen in New York, because other GMs were hearing rumors about Mike Maccagnan and Brian Heimerdinger, his right-hand man, potentially being fired. But the Jets came out and very publicly said those were not true, and they did things that reinforced that, including have Maccagnan do interviews after the draft in which he spoke at length about the draft picks, but also shot down any discussions or rumors about his relationship with Adam Gase. Then fast forward just a couple weeks, and the Jets deliver the news that Maccagnan has in fact been fired.
How attractive is this job going to be around the league, Ian?
It's going to be very attractive from a player standpoint. You don't have to go out and find a franchise quarterback. You have one. They did sign a bunch of free agents. Maybe financially that makes things a little difficult for them, because it's not like new GM can come in and do much, but it's a young team. There are a lot of pieces, so maybe you're not going to have to spend that much in free agency next year, regardless of who the GM is. So as long as it's someone who could come in and work with Gase, who is, you know, probably not for everyone. I would say it's going to be a pretty attractive job. It's also in New York, which is something that is great in some ways and not for everyone in other ways. But also consider the fact that there were no GM openings this year. So if you're a young personnel man who wants a GM opening, there's literally now one option, and it's the Jets. So yeah, I would say it's probably going to be pretty attractive.
Well, what ripple effect do you think this is going to have within the division? We know that the Patriots are very stable, and Miami is starting over as well. What do you think the effects are within the division themselves?
It probably shouldn't have much effect right now because, you know, so much of the work is done. You have the draft picks that have been, you know, not signed yet, but you do have the draft picks that have been picked. You have free agents that have been chosen. You know, there's not a lot that could be done right now from a GM perspective that would actually change things, except maybe save for, you know, some trades you might make either, you know, before training camp or maybe at cutdown day. A new GM could do it, but those really don't alter franchises, not this time of year. You know, this is the kind of move that will really, there'll be a new GM, but it's not going to actually change much until the new general manager or the new personnel director or whatever they end up hiring, until that person gets to come in and actually make an impact. But, you know, so it's going to be news. They'll have a GM and all of that. But it's not actually going to change things on the field for several months.
Well, we saw that they got Quinnen Williams. They obviously have a signal caller, as you had mentioned, one that they are looking to depend on in the future. They also ended up getting C.J. Mosley. What would be some concerns here for the Jets on this roster, if there are any?
Yeah, I mean, trying to find someone to come in and rush the passer would be certainly a concern. I mean, they're very strong up the middle. You mentioned Mosley, Quinnen Williams, obviously going to probably move him around some, but on this defensive line, he's going to be a key piece right in the middle, getting some pass rush on the edge, having to rely on a guy like Ja'Kai Polite. That's probably going to be a concern. That's something maybe you wish they had hit a little harder. That said, it's a young roster. Maybe not quite ready to win yet, but the kind of things where it needs probably more tinkering than a makeover. And I know that because Mike Maccagnan basically just completely made them over in a span of probably 18 or so months. Now is out of a job, and the Jets are looking for a new general manager.
And some folks in Gotham were already feeling that hangover from what happened with the NBA draft lottery and not landing Zion Williamson. So a lot happening in the news cycle, that is for sure. This one being a stunner. We'll certainly have much more at the top of the hour. Rap Sheet appreciated as always, as once again our breaking news out of New York. Mike Maccagnan, the GM of the Jets, is now out. The acting GM is going to be head coach Adam Gase.